Hello, Rick here, Certifiably Ingame, and it's been a while since I've done one of these top 10 videos. After my Federation at War series that I just did, parts 1 and 2, link here, plug, I thought it'd be a good idea to do a video on some of those individuals involved in those wars, and that progressed into the idea of doing a top 10 list of my favourite villains that Star Trek has had to offer. Of course, good and evil can vary depending on your point of view.
We seek peaceful coexistence.
But I think we can all agree most of these on this list fall onto the evil side of things. Or perhaps they're just terrifying. So, Garth and Gorns aside, let's get started. At number 10 we have the M113 Salt Creature. Now I remember watching a lot of Star Trek growing up with my parents, the original series mostly and early TNG episodes, and I also remember catching a glimpse of this thing one day and being terrified and refusing to watch Star Trek for the next couple of weeks. It was, I don't know, I was young, it's scary, and the way it just grabbed your face was just, I didn't like it, I didn't like anything about it, but growing up, looking back on it, I realised that's what made it so good. And why it stuck in my memory, because I was terrified of it. And to be fair, I still kind of am. If I woke up and found this thing in my room, I would freak out and jump out the window, and I live on a 3rd-storey building. I'd take my chances. At number 9, I'd like to categorise an entire group into this, but I can't really do that. That's probably a theme for a video for another day. Top 10 superpowers or something like that. But you can't have a villains list without mentioning in some capacity the huge superpower that brought the Federation to its knees through the course of DS9 and beyond. That would be the Dominion. So, what best represents the Dominion? Well, I've gone with, of course, the female shapeshifter. Never find out her name, she has no need for one. But the way that she just didn't care about anyone she deemed inferior, which would have been all solids, was just such an alien concept to the Federation's principles of inclusion and their ideals of peaceful coexistence that conflict with the Dominion would have been unavoidable. The fact that returning Odo to the Great Link was more important to her than the entire war between the Federation and the Dominion is crazy. That one life is worth so many in her eyes purely because she deems solids as an inferior form of life, in the same way that bugs matter very little to an apex predator. She had the same view of everyone, the entire galaxy, her own forces and the Federation's combined. And as a side note, as part of the Dominion, Jeffrey Combs as Wayun was brilliant. I loved his sycophantic suck-up attitude. It was great. He did a really good job with that. So he's not on my list because he's not exactly what you'd call a driving force behind the Dominion. But as a side note, I did like his portrayal as well. At number 8, again we have another sort of dark reflection character. And it's also a member of the Voyager crew. Well, I say Voyager crew, I mean the Marquis. Seska. Now I think what I liked about this character is that she lived so long amongst both the Marquis and then Voyager and getting straight into the Delta Quadrant. She went through all of this with them and still betrayed them. I mean, her desire to return home was so strong that she breaks the Prime Directive, allies with the Kazon Nistrum, and that weird obsession she has with Chakotay is just, to be fair, it's a little stalkerish and creepy. At number 7, we have probably one of the most insidious threats that the Federation has ever faced. Those neural parasites. Why are they on my list? Well, viewer discretion is advised. Just the idea that these things would have been successful in infiltrating the Federation and supplanting its ranks? It's a horrifying thought. Could you imagine what some sort of crazed alien power would do if it had control over the entire Federation? You'd end up with something like the Terran Empire overnight, practically. And that segment where they get a distress call out just at the end, pinpointing the location of the Earth, oh, boy, I hope we see them return in a future series. Now, if only we had a series that was set in the future after the events of Voyager and everything. That'd be handy. Oh well, I guess we're still waiting for that one. Anywho, moving on. From a tale of an alien force trying to corrupt the Federation comes an unfortunate twist of the Federation utilising an alien force. I'm of course talking about number 6 on my list, the crew of the USS Equinox. In particular, their captain, Rudolph Ransom. Trapped in the Delta Quadrant, just like Voyager was, they adopt a much more sinister get-home-at-any-costs approach, and that includes throwing out the ideals of the Federation by using an entire alien species as a fuel source. Draining off their power and then disposing of them, they invite destruction upon themselves when they find out that species can strike back. I don't think much more needs to be said. It's a pretty clear depiction in my eyes of humanity at its darkest. And in some ways, I find that's more terrifying than the M113 salt creature. Now, number 5 was a bit of a toss-up for me because it came down to 2 very close calls, both from roughly the same era of Star Trek and both Klingon. And that was the toss-up between Commander Kurge and General Chang. Now, I think purely for the more personal act, I eventually settled on Kurge, as he was the captain of the crew of Klingons that did kill Kirk's son, and again that makes it a much more personal experience for Kirk, and therefore as a viewer it makes it a more personal story to you, or me. And not only that, he's responsible for killing Kirk's other great love, the Starship Enterprise.
My God, Bones. What have I done?
Although yes, he does get killed off, he has a lasting effect on Kirk. Leading on for the future films, we see his pure distrust and hatred of Klingons. He cannot get over it, and to be fair, after everything that Kurge did to him, can we really blame him? And again we come to another dark reflection. The Borg. Unification and unity brought by the Federation but twisted to its most demonic extreme, where everyone is the same, they think the same, they have the linked mindset. And again, I can't put an entire species on this is for a list for another day, but if I had to pick one single example of how terrifying they are, it would have to be none other than Locutus of Borg. Poor Captain Picard, and I do not envy the situation that the crew of the Enterprise would have been put in, and the Battle of Wolf 359, where Picard's tactical insight into the Federation's workings just led to the destruction of so many Federation lives. That's something he then has to live with from then on. And that's horrible, the fact he was a passenger in his own mind, not in control of his actions. That's what makes the Borg terrifying, I think. And rather than the Borg Queen being on this list at this spot, I decided to put in Locutus, because it was that much more personal. Sure, the Borg Queen is the villain, the mastermind, the controlling force behind the Borg, but she herself, I think, is intrinsically part of the Borg and linked to it. Locutus was very much going to be the face of the Borg presented to the Federation. That was the plan, and the fact it was Picard made it so much more personal. And the best of both worlds were some of the best episodes of TNG that I've seen, and probably some of my favourite Star Trek episodes overall. And of course, what villains list would be complete without the mention of one Khan? Now, while I think Benedict Cumberbatch did an admirable job as Khan in the Star Trek revamped JJ verse, whatever you want to call it, I do think that Ricardo Montalban's performance as Khan in the original one is more iconic. I look at Cumberbatch, I see Sherlock. I look at him, I see Khan. Story he was in, Space Seed and TOS, was pretty interesting and raised some valid questions about the future of humanity and just genetic augmentation as a whole. It was of course the wrath of Karl that solidified him as the spot of being a certified badass, and a lot of it had to do with the way he was able to commandeer the Reliant and take it on that vendetta against Kirk, leading of course to one of the most tragic scenes in Star Trek history. I think what makes him a compelling villain as well is that in some level you do sympathise for him. The fact that, yeah, Kirk screwed up. He did not check on him. It appears no one came back to verify how this colony was getting along, and they were ruined. People died. His population was reduced to, I think it was like a third. On some level, you did empathise with Khan, but the thing was he was so consumed by his vendetta. He let his wrath overcome him to such a degree that the path he was walking was only going to end in his destruction. And I think that's what he wanted. A relic from another era, a time of war, bent on revenge and using any method and means to execute that. How else was it going to end for him? And at the number 2 spot, we have Data! No, wait, is that Data? No, Law! That's the one, Law. Yes, sorry, I have trouble telling them apart. Oh wait, that's how you do it. One of them's evil. What makes him so compelling is the fact that he is literally the evil twin of Data. You spend all this time getting to know Data and seeing how likeable he is and how benign he is, and that's completely flipped on its head when you meet Law, who by his very nature is selfish, ambitious, a born survivor and willing to exploit others for his own personal gain. This ties in very much with his whole manipulative, deceitful and lying nature. In this way he provides an excellent foil for Data's own personality and an added layer of complexity to his struggle to become more human. Plus he has a sense of humour. And at number 1, the most dastardly evil villain of all of Star Trek, Dr. Chaotica! Joking, of course. No, at number 1 is Gul Ducat. Where do I start with this character? I think a lot of his appeal comes from the fact that unlike a lot of the other characters on this list, he has had a long time for character development, being a staple throughout all of DS9 from its inception. This gave the character the benefit of being able to explore many story arcs and have the personality fully fleshed out. And one of the oddest things about this character is that when he's on the side of Cisco or the Federation, when their interests align, they work really well as a team. And he's almost this sort of renegade anti-hero at points, especially when he commandeers the Klingon bird of prey and goes off on his own private war. But time and time again we see these opportunities amount to nothing. In fact, he uses these small elements of good to justify the bigger evils and the atrocities that were committed under his rule, especially seeing things like the occupation of Bajor and so on. His sense of duty to the Cardassian order is so intrinsically linked to his ambitions that he even allies with the Dominion to try and keep them safe, which puts him at odds once more with the Federation and Cisco. And from then on, with his mental health deteriorating due to defeat, loss, imprisonment and betrayal, all amplified by his own sense of pride and ambition, it's not long before he's completely irredeemable, existing solely as the antithesis to Cisco, insomuch as even becoming possessed by the Power Wraiths, in direct opposition to Cisco's stance as the Bajoran emissary. Because Ducat's storyline is so long, it's hard to summarise here, but it's practically for the same reason that he takes the number 1 spot as my most favourite Star Trek villain. In fact, he's probably one of my most favourite villains of all time, across any media. And there we go. That's my top 10 villains from all of the Star Trek series. My personal favourites anyway, but I'm curious to know what yours are and why. Let me know in the comments below. My channel's still small enough that I'm actually able to read most of them. And if there are ones that I've missed, let me know who they are, because there's bound to be some villains of the week type characters that were potentially amazing that I've completely forgotten about. So until next video, I look forward to the discussions, and thank you for watching. I can't believe I've hit 2,500 subs. Thank you. And until next time, I've been Rick, this has been Ingame, and goodbye.